I want to start with Maker's Mark Classic. Maker's Mark Classic was created by Bill and Margie Samuels in 1953, and they started with a taste vision. Bill and his family had been making bourbon for generations, and he frankly didn't think that it was very good. He didn't think that his family's recipe was great. So he decided to start from scratch, to burn his family's recipe, and to start fresh, to start anew. And he had a taste vision. He wanted to make something that was warm, that was approachable, that was balanced, that was pleasant, that was simply easy for you to enjoy, something that you'd be really proud to share with your friends. And I'm from the south part of the USA, and if I were to burn my family's recipe, I'm not sure I would be allowed back into the house. So quite a bold moment for them to do that. But I think it really spoke to his ideals of what he really wanted to create, his belief that what we were making simply wasn't good enough. That pursuit of flavor was something that was really driving him. And
we know exactly what the biggest tweak was between an old recipe and this.
I'll get to that. Jumping ahead. Good immediate question. You're getting ahead of my spiel.
Making sure you're on your toes.
No, I'm on my toes. Don't worry. I'll get you there. I need to get him to the whiskey a little faster. So he made a couple of interesting choices between himself and Marcy. They actually established here in Loretto, Kentucky. And you probably went on that drive today. If this is your first time here, you're probably like, wow, am I lost? As you're coming from Louisville or Lexington to the distillery, your cell phone might start to lose reception and you're like, what? Am I on the right track? But this place was really purposefully chosen for two key reasons. One is its access to a water source. So we have a 12-acre and an 8-acre lakes that are up top. They provide us with our water that goes into our mashing. And water is really critical to American whiskey. You might have heard the statistic that 95% of bourbon is made in Kentucky. And you might ask, why is that? It's because Kentucky sits on a limestone shelf. That limestone shelf, it removes iron from water, which can make whiskey turn black and acrid. And it also adds in calcium and magnesium, which gives you a nice fruity bourbon fermentation. It gives you that depth and complexity in your whiskey. So water quality is so important. And having the ability to have your own water source that you control the quality of, and we do own the entire watershed around our water source to protect that water quality and the aquifer below it is so important to the consistency of our particular product. So that was choice number one, was around water. Choice number two was proximity to grains. So as you drove here, you probably saw a lot of farmland. So we have great access to corn, to wheat, and to rye. Now, to your question, what was the biggest choice that he made? He made a choice to choose wheat. When the category number was rye. So for us, our mash bill is 70% corn, 16% soft red winter wheat, and 14% malted barley. So that is a really, yeah, it's 70% corn. I'm showing here as an actual illustration within the bottle. 70% corn, 16% soft red winter wheat, and 14% malted barley. And that proximity to grains was really important to them, not only because it gives you a flavor of place. We source our corn and our wheat from within a 75-mile radius of the distillery, which gives you that flavor of terroir, but we're also a single source distillery. We don't buy bulk liquid, we don't sell bulk liquid, which is really unique within the American whiskey category, where if you go look at the shelves in Kentucky now, you never know quite who's making the spirit and the ethics behind any of the things we do. So that proximity to grains, the ability to be single source, to have water, and for us, we're also big believers in regenerative agricultural practices, ensuring that we're getting the highest quality grain. So all of our farmers for corn and wheat are certified with regenerative agriculture practices through a company called Regenified, which is a USDA process verified selection for regenerative agriculture. And we believe that healthier soils lead to more nutrient-dense crops, which makes for more flavorful whiskey.
And you've had to bring them along with you once you make the...
We have, yeah. So there's a lot of education and verification, but also synergy, because not only do they grow crops for us, but they also grow other crops, and all those are certified as Regenified. So just the reason that trace minerals are important in water, exact same reason they'd be important in your crops as well. So when he chose wheat, wheat has a really specific flavor profile versus rye. The category norm at the time and to this day within American whiskey is to choose rye. Rye gives you a spicy, boldy note. But that spice note is more of a black pepper, clove, almost like a grass type of note, whereas wheat is going to be sweeter, it's going to be more delicate, and it's also going to give you a spice note, but it's going to be more in like your warm holiday baking spices note. So think about like your cinnamons and your nutmegs. We also use a proprietary yeast strain handed down from the Samuel's generation, and that gives us just a very specific fruit note. Think about it as a fresh cherry or a bright citrus type of note that's going to express itself in different ways depending on the variant that you have. And that is quite unique to us. So that choice of wheat, which gives you that unique baking spice, that creaminess, and by creaminess I mean that viscosity, that weight, that coating on your tongue, is quite unique to us within Maker's Mark, alongside that fruity note. And we age to taste. One of the things that you'll see here is fully mature and age to taste. And you might say, well, what exactly does that mean? It means that we enter into the barrel at 110 proof. That is a lower alcohol concentration going into the barrel, which means we extract more of the wood sugars, gives us more of those that sweeter type of profile. And we only use ripped barrels, so only barrels stored on their side. So that ensures that our liquid touches all aspects of the barrel. It is much more common in the industry today to use palletized or vertical storage. It is cheaper and more efficient to build those warehouses, maybe even a little safer to operate. However, it does have a significant flavor impact when you make that choice. Same with entry proof. Many people enter in at a higher proof. You get more bottles per barrel. However, it also has an impact on flavor. We rotate our barrels, so they spend the first 3 years of their life at the top of the warehouse where it's quite hot, so you're getting a lot of the extractive force out of the cask. They're then physically hand rotated to the bottom of the warehouse for the remainder of their life. And that slows the maturation down and allows oxidation to really occur. But what that creates is consistency within our maturing inventory. Most bourbon distilleries, they take a couple barrels from the top, a couple barrels from the middle, and a couple barrels from the bottom. They blend them together to create their product. So they have a variability that's around this high. But because of our rotation, our variability is much less, a much more consistent flavor profile. And we age for a minimum of 6 years, all the way up to 8 years. And one of the big things I want you to take away when it comes to American whiskey is that age is not an indicator of quality. Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing to consider. Most global whiskeys, especially in the international markets, more age means it must be better. They typically come with a higher cost, and consumers do somewhat resonate with that. But why that is not correct in American whiskey is for two reasons. The first is that we use new casks. Those new casks are extremely active. And by that, that means that the cask is going to be adding in a lot of color. It's going to be adding in a lot of flavor. And that flavor is quite nice to a degree. Over time, as you continue to age American whiskey in our climate, which is the second reason where we have really big swings on temperature, you're going to get more and more influence of that new cask. And at a certain point in time, depending on all the choices that you make within your process, it will start to take over the profile. It will become unbalanced. It will not have that harmony of notes. It will start to become quite tannic, astringent, and bitter. And it's like licking the inside of a cask. So all the notes of grain and all the notes of fruit, they go away, and you're just getting the notes of barrel. So you will see 15, 20, 25-year-old American whiskeys, and they smell amazing on the nose. They smell so good, and they taste so bad. They are really difficult to drink. Some people have become acclimated to that, and they think that that's what American whiskey is supposed to taste like. And I love to have that debate with people that they are wrong and I'm right. And because I'm the one talking, I get to say that I'm right. So that is our kind of walkthrough in a really brief telling of like what makes us unique and special when it comes to classic Maker's Mark from a liquid standpoint. But just keep in mind that's not the only thing that makes a brand. We also have our iconic red wax dip, our mark of the maker, the SIV, the label, the distinct bottle shape, those are all the choices of Margie Samuel. So while Bill was our creative genius when it comes to liquid, she was our real inspiration when it comes to all things packaging. She was the first woman inducted to the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame for her contributions towards packaging design and making this brand something that is so iconic. So we like to say that this has substance and style, that it brings good taste to tastes good. So please, I would like for you to taste Bill Sr.'s Taste Vision. So that is number 1 on your board here. And I'm going to go over here. Sorry.
You addressed it before, but I'm a terrible actor, wasn't it? The mash bill for this, can you just quickly run through?
Yeah, it's 70% corn, 16% soft red winter wheat, and 14% malted barley. Cool. So the unique differences for us within that mash bill are the choice of wheat and the choice of a high amount of malted barley. Within the American whiskey industry, most mash bills are the majority corn and rye. And the amount of malt most people use is around 5% or less. So that malt gives you flavor, but also gives you a lot of structure and complexity when it comes to your whiskey. And the wheat gives you that specific spice note and that creaminess that I mentioned. That creaminess, not meaning dairy, but meaning that viscosity, that weight on your tongue. So as you go to smell this, I want you to think about 2 things. A lot of people like to give you specific tasting notes, like caramel and vanilla and oak. Other category norms, but depending on where you're from, I might say caramel, and you might think of caramel in Japan, which is probably going to be much less sweet than a caramel in the U.S. So I'd like for you to think about essence first. I'd like for you to think about when you go to smell it, does it have a lot of flavor or a little bit of flavor? Does it have intensity of flavor? Do you have to bury your nose in the glass, or does it jump out to you? As you're smelling it, does it have complexity and depth in the aroma? Are you getting many different elements within that? Or is it quite singular? And then as you go to taste, does the flavor match what's in the aroma, or is it disaggregated? As I mentioned with those older American whiskeys, smells great, but the taste is really different. Is there a brace between that? How does it feel on your tongue? Does it coat your tongue? Does it sit on your tongue? And as you go to swallow it on the finish, does that finish have intensity to it? Does it have volume to it, or does it flash off of your palate really, really quickly? And in general, is it something that you enjoy? Is it something that you feel like, I want to keep this in my mouth, or is it something you want to chase out of it? That's what we think of like as the essence of any product. So you'll hear us use that as like, how do you assess spirit quality, whether it's American whiskey, whether it's tequila, whether it's scotch, doesn't really matter. That concept, no matter where you're from, whether you're from Japan, whether you're from the US, whether you're from the UK, doesn't matter. It corresponds to all of us. But we also must be cognizant that customers and consumers do like specific notes. So within the American whiskey sphere, you will get the caramels, the vanillas, the oak out of this. As you start to smell it, you might pick up some of that citrus, cherry type of note on the nose. So now I'd like for you to take a little taste. This is 45% alcohol by volume or 90 proof. So keep that in mind. So take a little taste, let your tongue get acclimated to the alcohol, and then take another behind it, and you'll start to pick up some of those notes. So I'll give you guys just a couple seconds here. Take a few sips, 1, 2, 3, however many you need this morning to calm your stomach after the windy roads. So you'll start to see that kind of mouthfeel. That I talk about, that creaminess that coats your tongue, but the finish is really approachable. It's complex. It's got that balance, that harmony between the grains, between the yeast, between the oak, and the finish. You get a little bit of those holiday spices on the back end, those cinnamons, those nutmegs, maybe a little bit of other apple pie spice type of notes. But really ultimately quite approachable, easy to enjoy, as our founder intended. So from 1953 all the way until 2010, we only made one product, and it was Maker's Mark Classic. And in 2010, the business had been handed over from Bill Sr. to Bill Jr., and Bill Jr., which was his son, was closing in on retirement, and he was handing over the business to his son, Rob Samuels, who is our 8th generation farm distiller and our managing director and my boss. And he and Bill, they were at an event, and Rob talked about the brand for a little over an hour, and he never mentioned Bill once. And Bill had a bit of a moment there, like, whew, man, what is my legacy? You're really going to be here at Maker's Mark. Bill also has a fun saying where he says, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. And he said that the other way I've heard him tell it to me personally, he said, Blake, well, I had a dream. I had a dream that I was in a graveyard, and I came to a decrepit tombstone that was unloved and uncared for. And as I brushed the moss and debris off of the tombstone, it said, here lies Bill Samuels Jr. He didn't fuck it up. I thought that was a great retelling. I'm not sure where the truth really lies, but a retelling of he wanted to make his perfect version of Maker's Mark. He wanted to not be known just for making his dad's whiskey. He wanted to make his perfect version of Maker's Mark. And he wanted to start with a taste vision just like his father, where his father started with something that would be warm, balanced, approachable, easy for you to enjoy. He wanted to make his perfect version of Maker's Mark, something that was yummy, something that was Maker's Mark on steroids, and something that had a long finish, but with no bitter aftertaste. But he gave a distinct challenge to his team. He said, you can't change the mash bill, you can't change the distillation parameters, and you can't change the barrel. Kind of put a lot of handcuffs on his team. But he works with really smart people. In present day, that would be myself and our lead blender, Beth Buckner. Welcome her into the room. And he would have said to someone like me, you're our resident smart person, go figure it out. And so what the team did is they leveraged a technique from the wine industry, where they took 10 new virgin French oak staves and they put it into fully matured cast strength Maker's Mark for 9 weeks at a cool, cold temperature. And that pulled and expressed different flavors out of Maker's Mark. It pulled up the caramel notes, it pulled up the spice notes, and that hit his taste vision for what he was looking for. So he created this beautiful liquid, and he went to his brand team and said, I have made my perfect version of Maker's Mark. I said, well, Bill, what are you going to call it? And Bill, if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting him, I think you'll meet him maybe tonight. He's a fun guy, and he hates marketers. He thinks they're the fastest way to mess up a product. And so he called Independent Stave Company, and Independent Stave Company said, what do you call this stave that went into this? He said, well, it was just the 46th recipe that we happened to use that worked for your flavor. And so that's why we call it Maker's Mark 46, which is quite confusing because it is 47% alcohol by volume.
So is there a toast grading on those staves?
There is toast. So think about the wood as a steak. You can cook it in different ways, time, temperature, and how you cook it. Infrared versus convection, they all express different flavors. So that's the proprietary information that ISC controls.
Yeah.
So they say, here's to hit your flavor profile. So let's taste Maker's Mark 46.
Hey Blake, these steaks are cooked in an infrared oven.
Yeah,
So think about cooked like
yeah.
a pizza oven.
Yeah.
That's how these steaks.
So not
Steak, yeah.
not flame.
Yeah, not jarred.
And Blake, you do have a couple of marketers in the room. I'll let them remain anonymous if they choose to be.
Hey, those are Bill's words, not mine. I don't have the same feeling about marketers. Just saying. Name it.
I'm just
True. Somewhat true.
I'll show myself up.
They're talking about you, Fred.
Talking about you. So as you smell, keep in mind those essence. Think about that intensity, that velocity, that harmony, that balance. And as you go to sip, think about do they match, and what notes are similar and what notes are different. Because remember, this starts as cast strength Maker's Mark, has the finishing step, and that evolves the flavor profile. So there will be some similarities and there will be some differences. So to me, when I think about Bill's vision of that Maker's Mark on steroids, this is certainly a bolder version of Maker's Mark. It is stronger, not only from the alcohol concentration, but the oak notes are certainly dialed up. The caramel notes are dialed up, and that finish is absolutely longer, in my opinion. So when I think about Maker's Mark and Maker's Mark 46, I love Maker's Mark, neat on its own, but it also makes great sours. When I think about that sweetness and that fruitiness, and like a really classic whiskey sour, or even like a stretched sour with some sparkling water, like a highball almost, but with a little bit of sourness to it. This performs so well versus anything else within the market. And 46 is really nice also on its own, but it does super well in your stronger cocktails. So think about your old fashions or your Manhattans. It is quite nice. And when I'm traveling, my secret go-to is an espresso martini, but swapping out vodka for Maker's Mark. The caramel and the sweetness and the oak notes. I do it with Classic. And it is my go-to secret weapon when I'm traveling and I'm trying to kick any type of jet lag. So what's interesting about 46, as well as it being its own unique proposition, is it set the guardrails for what innovation is meant to be at Maker's Mark. It means that flavor comes from place, that it comes from nature. So there have been so many people that are like, wow, should you do a sherry cask finish? Wouldn't it be amazing if you took a Lafroig barrel and you put Maker's Mark in it to secondary age it? That would be bringing in someone else's flavor into ours. It wouldn't be ownable to us. It wouldn't be something that our founders would be proud of. And that flavor comes from nature. It comes from grains, it comes from oak, it comes from yeast, it comes from water, and it comes from time. How you manipulate and articulate those variables creates the diversity of whiskeys that you see on the shelf. So I think that's a really powerful lesson for us that has kept us really focused on innovation. While you do see innovations flow out of this distillery, they seem to be very specific. They have a purpose, and they always halo back to what makes Maker's Mark Classic so special. So as Rob has taken over the business, he really wanted to ask, what can we really communicate to our customers and consumers about why wheat is such an important choice? Like, how do we explain that flavor profile? Because that is our distinctive and unique asset within Maker's Mark. The category is dominated by rye. There are very few wheated bourbons. So how do we really talk about wheat? And that led us to create our first ever new mash bill, which was it was 70% wheat and 30% malted barley. And you might say, wow, why did you choose that mash bill? Well, remember, classic Maker's Mark is 70% corn, 16% soft red winter wheat, 14% malted barley. We just removed the corn. So we took all the corn out and we focused on our flavoring grains. And then he asked the question of, well, how do you know you went too far unless you go far enough? So that led us to create our second new mash bill, which was 100% malted wheat. And we started to talk a lot about how does wheat, but also what is the impact of grain varietals and what is the impact of terroir? And then why is terroir so impactful? And the farming practices that occur within certain regions that drive that flavor of place. So Star Hill Farm is our newest launch. This is a wheat whiskey within the U.S. This is at cask strength. This is number 3 on your tasting icon here. And this is a blend of 7 and 8-year-old whiskeys. And if you think about those two mash bills, it's about 75% of the 70-30, with the remainder coming from the 100%. It goes into 5 different barrel types. One is our classic standard Char 3 American oak barrel. We'll think about that as our experimental control. And then 4 experimental barrels between American oak, French oak, hybrid barrels, and even looking at surface area within the barrels to drive unique, distinct blending streams to give us a lot of complexity within what we have to pull together.
The marrying of the different mash bills happened after maturation?
Correct. So each mash bill goes into a distinct barrel. Those barrels are aged. We are not rotating barrels. In this case, we're letting nature do its work. Instead of trying to control the consistency, we want that variability. So when we pull it together, it creates a really unique blending streams for us. So over 80 component blends actually went into this final product here. So I'd like for you to take a taste of number 3. This is just hitting the shelves actually it hasn't hit the shelves yet. It will be in mid-May. So coming soon to the shelves near you. This is $100 per bottle.
So when it's blended, it's blended for bottling, or does it get any extra barrel time as a blend?
So it blends and then we let it take bat for a full month to let everything really marry and come together and create one complete whiskey.
Yeah, so it's really rich on the nose. You get a lot of nice caramel notes on here, kind of honey caramel notes. I get a little bit of gingerbread on here as you go to taste it. Really quite soft and delicate. It drinks quite a bit less than its alcohol content. So the alcohol content on this is 57.35% alcohol by volume. Drinks a bit under that, but you get some nice chocolate covered cherry notes on here.
It's got a different mouthfeel.
Yeah, that mouthfeel's really dialed up, so you get that mouthfeel impact that we talk about with wheat. And on the finish, really quite flavorful, envelops your palate quite nicely. Some toasted pecans, and maybe even a little bit of cinnamon, like dry cinnamon spice. So we're really excited about this release, and you'll see this continue to be unique and distinct vintages each year. So as we are highlighting wheat, in this case, we will be exploring different varietals of wheat in years to come, where those varietals are grown, and then ultimately we'll have regenerative agriculture coming in. But we have learned a lot from this, and our learning on Star Hill Farm has led us to make all of our corn and wheat coming from regeneratively certified sources. So because we've done this experiment and we've learned so much about the importance of agricultural practices, we've actually already instituted and implemented that within Maker's Mark Classic and that entire portfolio coming out. So we were certified in November of 2023 for having all of our new make spirit is certified by Regenify. So we're really quite proud of that. I've blathered for a while, and I know we're coming up on time. Any questions that you might have for me or for Beth?
Yeah. How many different varieties of wheat are in the bottle?
So for this particular one, this would be malted wheat, and malted barley.
Yeah.
This would just be one varietal of wheat in this particular vintage. In future years, you'll see us start to explore different varietals of that.
Do you think about adding vintage wheat varieties as well?
We do. We do have some historical varietals coming up, as well as for barley. So we're looking at a couple different aspects of it. It is difficult to grow distillers quality barley in Kentucky due to our climate. We have quite good conditions for barley, and for distillers barley, you need stressed conditions and like almost drought stricken. So that's why it tends to be grown in the Midwest part of the United States.
And malted there, or?
So for us, we send it to a craft maltster in North Carolina. Any other questions? This is a blend of 7 and 8 year old whiskeys. 7 and 8 year old whiskeys. So in the Japanese market, we can't say what percentage it blends. We can only say the lowest mark. So it would be a 7-year-old whiskey in your market. Within the U.S., we can give more context. So we can say that it was grains harvested, distilled, and barreled in the fall of 2016 and the fall of 2017. So that's the 7 and 8 year old.
Like, is the same for the Korea market?
For Korea, yes. Anything outside of the U.S., we have to say just whatever the youngest mark is. And then
We can't give any more additional.
Correct. And in your markets, it'll be known as American whiskey, not as wheat whiskey. Within the U.S., again, we have different levels of distinction within American whiskey. In your market, it would just say American whiskey. Good point of clarification.
Yeah, sure.
Where is Star Hill Farm stored? Is it in the same rick houses as the rest of Makers, or is it?
It used to be, and then I took over an entire warehouse.
Okay.
So we don't have one whole innovation warehouse
Okay.
for Star Hill Farm.
Oh, cool.
Got it. Okay. And you talked about cool, cold temperatures for the 9 weeks, the 46 is maturing with the French oak staves. Is that at the bottom of the rick house, or is that presumably, or is it in like its own does it go into the cellar?
So that's actually what the cellar is for.
into the cellar.
So that is why we created the cellar, was to maintain that consistent condition, because before 46 was constrained by, we could only make it in the winter within the warehouses. So we could only do it in the winter, and in order to provide more 46, we, in the most American thing possible, we dynamited the side of a mountain to create our cellar, and that maintains a consistently cool condition that is 10 degrees Celsius or less year round.
And final question on warehouses. We were talking on the way here, like there are rick houses obviously located sort of all over the farm. Does the location of that rick house, like, does it differentiate the whiskey that comes out of it ever so slightly? Are there differences between where they are?
There are. A lot of it, that's why it's age to taste,
Yeah.
because every warehouse has nuances. Direction it's facing, is it on the top of the hill or down in the valley?
Exposure.
All of those things have an impact, so they'll all age slightly differently, which is sometimes more complexity than we'd like, but that's the entire antithesis of Maker's Mark, is consistency.
Yeah.
So we will continue to let each warehouse have its own unique environment and leverage that to make one complete whiskey.